Aloha, everyone, and welcome to this edition of HIAMFT's Facebook Live. I'm John Souza, the president, joined by Danny Gardner, East Hawaii chapter rep, and everything else extraordinary related to HIAMFT. And we're here for part two with Shelley Huntington, who has graciously accepted the invitation to speak with us again and share her wisdom. Shelley, aloha.
Aloha.
Right. Great. So let's just jump right into it. Shelley, now we were just talking and you said you had some stuff you wanted to share or talk about today.
I do. I wanted to talk about teenage transgender or non-binary kids today.
Oh, fantastic topic. Yes. Perfect for Pride Month that we're in here, right?
It
Just
is.
wrapping up. Great. We'd love to hear your thoughts and wisdom on this.
Absolutely. So last week, I had talked a little bit about this topic, and I talked about where I went to get some training to learn how to work with transgender clients, and that I had gone to Seattle and worked with the Ingersoll group there. And so one of the things that is important to know is that there are resources available to help a person that might find themselves with their first transgender client in the room. So the first one that we talk about is the WPATH. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of the WPATH, but the WPATH is the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. Now, I will tell you the WPATH is working on version 8 right now. This is version 7, which is pretty good. And it talks about all the different processes from young kids to teenagers to older adults. And it talks about all of the different pieces, which we're going to talk about different pieces and what happens when a person starts to transition from one gender to another. Now, the difference is in if we're talking a transgender person, we are talking binary. Usually, we're going from one to another. However, I will tell you, young people today are non-binary. They're gender non-conforming. They're gender fluid. So those three terms are used very fluently in the teenager community. They also use the different terms like sexually fluid as well. So I'm going to bring up one more resource and there's probably lots of them out there, but the one that I brought up today is actually my homework assignment for school. And it's the guidelines for psychological practice with transgender and gender non-conforming people from the APA. So this is like out there for you as clinicians to go and find. And it talks about it being guidelines, not standards, which is what's the difference? Just like in the military, it's the difference between may and shall, right? So guidelines are may, you may do this. Standards are shall, you must do this. And so some of the great things that it talks about is guideline number 1. Well, as a psychologist or therapist, I should know. I need to know, what does non-binary mean? What does that mean? And that it's the spectrum of gender. And I know most folks know that kind of, sort of, in a way. But if you find yourself, once again, sitting with this teenager, they've, like I said last week, they've already watched probably every video out in YouTube about what it takes to transition from one gender to another gender. So you want to be hip and you want to know what's going on and not sit there and learn everything from your teenager. Not that you won't learn things from your teenager, because you will, but you'd like to know a few things. Here's one of the first things that I do ask my young teenager, which is guideline number 2, is understanding the difference between gender identity and sexual orientation. Many people sometimes mix this up in different ways. But gender is really that biological sex or gender, right? Sex is usually a biological thing in your body, has to do with your biological parts. It might have to do with your DNA. Gender, on the other hand, is roles that society has determined to be male or female. So in different societies, gender roles could be completely different. In our society in the United States, there are some gender roles that have been blurred, but it also might depend upon where you live. So some parts of our country may be more stringent on gender roles than other parts of our country. And there's a struggle trying to figure out, gender roles, what does that mean versus sex, which has to do with your biological parts. And so some of that has to do with jobs. Some of it might have to do with expectations in your home, with your peers. It all has those different interactions that happen for gender roles.
There's a cultural aspect as well that's very important to pay attention to. Certain cultures allow children who are born either male or female to take on more of the other gender roles, depending on if there's a missing parent, or if there is a or if they're born more fluid. Certain cultures will allow children to express themselves both biologically and what I guess is it expression gender. So I just wanted to point that out as well, because it's so important to me as a future therapist to fully comprehend the cultural aspect as well, especially coming from a culture that is so strict when it comes to, you're born a boy, you're going to look like a boy, you're going to behave like a boy, you're going to dress like a boy. And if that boy decides one day and says, you know what, it doesn't fit, how do you address those cultural barriers? That's kind of where I'm very interested in. So please share.
That was, guess what? That's number 3.
Whoa,
is understanding those cultural barriers and cultural identities for transgender non-conforming people. And part of that is you have to do your homework, right?
Okay.
Part of it is doing your homework. Part of it is actually asking the person that's with you to make sure, because even if there is cultural norms out there, remember the person we have in front of us is a unique individual, and their culture part of it may have been Americanized and part of it may not have been. So you have to really be open to understanding not just culture, but this person and where they are coming from. So I'm not going to go through all of these guidelines because I want to talk about some specific things to help this young person that's sitting in front of you. And I will admit, I have had many teenagers in my office and I become confused. And maybe it's because I'm an old lady. I'm just telling you. Folks come in and they, and I always have the parent in first session. And first session may just be 30 minutes or less with the parent to make sure that we are all in awareness of what we're going to talk about, what's going to happen. A lot of parents fear therapists because they think that the therapist is going to try to convince this young person that there's something. And that's not true. Well, not true for this therapist. My job is to help this young person with not just their feelings of being gender nonconforming, but what are the other things that might be happening with this person in their life. So we'll talk about in first session with the parent, the very first thing we talk about is the right of consent. Because in the state of Washington, it's 13, but in the state of Hawaii, it's 14, because I looked it up today. And so what does that even mean? Because some parents don't even know what that truly means. And so what it means is that you can ask me what happened in session, and I can say, I'm sorry, that's confidential between me and my client. What I have found working with young people is I have had limited releases of information, because it's usually the parent that drives the person here to the appointment. And so, and sometimes it's also the guardian or parent or whoever it might be who also sets up the appointment for them to come to. So we do have a limited usually ROI for that, because I'm going to let you know that teenagers forget. They forget when their appointment is. They do, sometimes they put it in their phone and sometimes they don't. So that limited ROI with a parent is pretty important to make sure that your young person gets here on time for their session. So that would be the only thing that would be authorized to talk to a parent about. So then we might have, periodically, we might have a parent come in for a session once in a while if there's questions that might be happening. But this is all up to the young person and what they decide. So psychoeducation, very, very important. I would ask my young person, what is the difference between gender and sexuality? I would say 75% of the time they know. They already know what the difference is. But you have to realize that a lot of 13, 14-year-olds may have never even been in a relationship yet. All right. So, and even if they are in a relationship, it certainly isn't a relationship like an adult relationship. They may have found somebody that makes them excited, but they haven't even kissed yet, right? Or they haven't even, they think holding hands might be the relationship. It's hard to know. However, I will be very blunt that young people are early and earlier in age becoming very sexual. And I have been surprised at some of the things that have happened in session about how sexual they become. And so it's very important as the therapist to, when you have those first sessions, to let the young person know you will never lie to them, and make sure that they understand the importance of safety, right? Because sexting is very serious, and some people, young people, will take a picture of their stuff, send it to a friend, but we have to have that serious conversation of knowing that if it's out on the internet, it's out there forever. And I'll also say, how many boyfriends or girlfriends have you had this year? Usually 5 or 6. And so the reality is the person you're with right now, are they potentially going to be with you forever? Probably not. And so if they get mad at you, then that picture can be all over the school. So we do have those serious conversations. We also talk about STDs, or sexually transmitted diseases, and how important to know what does that mean, because it isn't just syphilis and gonorrhea. I mean, it's herpes, it's HPV, it's HIV. It's these different things that you don't want to have forever. And so that means, I mean, I've had persons tell me that they thought their birth control would protect them from STDs. And I'm like, no, that protects you from getting pregnant. And so we have to have, as therapists, these important conversations, even if we think it should be from the parent. Unfortunately, they aren't from the parent, because a lot of young people are afraid to even talk about that, which is a whole nother session, a 30-minute thing to talk about. So one of the things that comes up is gender dysphoria. And so what happens is I'll have a young person in the office. And many times when I have a young client who is in gender dysphoria and they dislike their parts so much that they usually don't even try to look at it, right? They have a hard time having these body parts. So when I have a person that's kind of confused, they think they're transgender, but here's an example. I might have a person, let's say female to male, who comes in. Now realize young people are way different than we are, way different. So I'll have a young person that comes in that's female to male, wearing makeup, wearing earrings, having long fingernails. And in my world, I'm thinking, what? What's happening here? I don't understand. And so basically, we'll talk about that. And then I will ask them probably the miracle question. I might ask them the miracle question. And usually, if you don't get in that miracle question that they wish they were the other gender, then you have to kind of take a step backwards and find out, where are we? Where are we really? I mean, and what happens is, honestly, this person becomes non-binary, gender non-conforming, which is fine. But then the next thing you have to ask, well, what does that mean for this young person? Because remember, in the W path, there's lots of paths on your way to wherever that destination happens to be. So it could be what I wear, right? I may wear things that are the opposite gender, whatever that looks like. Because I've also had straight young men in the office who wear makeup, earrings, rings, fingernails, straight. So we have to really kind of hold back our stigma in our own brain and bias of what we think things are. So important to be open, affirming therapy, because what we might have is a co-occurring event of a person who's very depressed, a person who might be suicidal, a person who has a lot of anxiety, and we have to find those out, find these things with this young person in the room. So what I have found, though, when I have a person who is really struggling with dysphoria, the miracle question that will come out in their miracle question. So one of the other hard things about working with teenagers is actually establishing that therapeutic relationship, because you're a stranger, and their mother probably picked you to come to, and they probably are not the ones that picked you as the therapist. So as you talk to this person and you're trying to link with them or establish that relationship, there are lots of things, like you try to talk about school, and it's, struggling with school is probably normal. There's a lot of people who, young people who have struggled with grades. And the reason why they have struggle with grades is because when a young person is in gender dysphoria, it's hard to think about anything else. They're consumed with the thought of trying to be that gender. And so thinking about what I want to be when I grow up is not anywhere on the list of things that's happening in that young person's life. So I might try to talk about a lot of young people game. So I might ask them about their avatar and what game they play and what does their avatar look like. And a lot of times their avatar is going to look like probably what they want to look like. They'll be, if they're male to female, they might play a female character. If female to male, they may play a male character. They may not, but that's potentially part of what happens. The other thing, like one of my very first homework assignments would be to have the person actually look around, look at their world and look at what is this gender they want to be. So if they want to be, let's say, male to female, I'll ask them to look around at females, notice what females look like. I say that because Shelley's a female, but Shelley is not femme by any stretch of the imagination. And so a lot of times a teenager and older adults as well, there's this thing that happens where we get into trying to pass, like passing as the gender that they wish to be. And the importance of this homework assignment is for them to notice that female to male, or let's say male to female, the biggest struggle is hair, right? Hair, because they'll get electrolysis or something to try and stop hair from growing. But unfortunately, many women struggle with hair as well. And so just this noticing of the world. The other thing that I have found is many young girls struggle with their cycle, their period, right? Who doesn't? I mean, all of my friends, we all hated our cycle. Nobody wanted to start their period. And so you have to figure out all of the pieces that go with the dysphoria. Is that a normal thing, that not wanting to have a period, or is it something else? Is there something different going on? So there's a lot of pieces to transitioning, and it usually starts with dress. It usually starts with mannerisms, and then it can go anywhere from there. So, gosh, I think I talked too fast, but I wanted you guys to, get that there's just a lot out there on.
There is.
Yes.
I've done a lot of research on transgender studies because it is something that I was involved with many, many years ago. I've got some friends who have transitioned. One in particular, she transitioned while she was in the military, and she was a high-ranking officer. And it was really controversial, but she did it anyway, and now she's living her best life. She is a success story, and I love sharing her story, and I would love to have her on Facebook Live someday.
Oh yeah.
But, I think one of the things that it really pains me as a person and as a volunteer for the community is the pain and suffering that they have to deal with. And unfortunately, the transgender community specifically has a 40% suicide rate.
Yes,
and I keep looking at that number annually, hoping it will go down, and it hasn't gone down. So as a future therapist, I want to be a safe space for them. I want to be someone that they can come to and talk about. And from, my studies and listening to you and other therapists who do focus on the transgender community, it's about knowing them and helping them know themselves. Once they get to that point and accept themselves, then you can move to step 2. But it is really hard, just when you ask the question, tell me about your avatar. It makes them think. And it really resonates with me because I'm helping a current friend who is in a similar situation. And, there's a lot of cons, a lot of like, but somebody's going to say this. So what? What are you saying about yourself is my question. How you feel about yourself is a lot more important. So I really love this topic, and honestly, it could be like 10 episodes. It's really, really wonderful. So
I agree.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Shelley, for coming back and sharing WPATH with us. It's been wonderful to see you again.
You too.
Well,
Mr. John.
I couldn't have said it any better myself. So much good education. Shelley, mahalo to you for sharing your wisdom with us and your experience. Danny, and yours as well. I've taken the WPATH link and put it in the chat so folks can access that, as well as some additional resources for folks who might need some support. There's some suicide hotline information in there. And then I also put a link to the gender bred person, which is a tool that I've often used with clients and for myself to understand some of the differences between things like gender and sex and all those things.
Right on.
So we'll wrap it up for today. Thank you everyone for watching. We hope this was enlightening, and I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see Shelley again sometime in the not too distant future. So have a wonderful rest of your week, and we'll see you all next week.
Mahalo.